The following presentation was recorded live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for the 22nd Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers. This is tape number 9, Managing a Home Program.
Good, everything should be working now. So the people on the tape know what this is. It's the Self-Improvement 103. I like that number, Managing a Home Panel. On my left is Chuck Jaworski. Am I saying that right? Jaworski. And where's your good wife, or your partner? Becky, where are you? You're busy passing out Becky Ho down there is his partner. And over here we have Gary Mahnken, is that how you pronounce it? Mahnken, I'm close. And your wife is? Margie. And where's Margie? Way down here. I have a very little outline of what these fellows have been doing. Oh, I just got Gary's. And I've got Chuck's here. Chuck is a full-time caller, and by that I mean full-time. Sunday evenings, Monday morning, afternoon and evening, Tuesday morning, afternoon, twice in the evenings. Yeah, Wednesday morning and afternoon. He has the evening off on Wednesdays, Thursday evening, Friday morning and evening, Saturday evening. So it gives you an idea, and these are all clubs. They're not touring or anything of that nature. Gary and his wife from what's MO stand for? Missouri? Ah, gosh, I made a good guess on that. Where am I from? I'm from Saskatchewan. I'm Martin Mallard from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. He's been calling for 30 years. How long have you been calling, Chuck? 30 years. So we got 30 years from him, 30 years from on my right, and 40 years from me. There's a fair bit of years up here. Presently, Gary is calling for 6 clubs, calls for festivals, weekends, and club dances, many parts of the U.S. Is a grain and livestock farmer, so he works for a living to support his habit. Myself, I've been calling for 40 years, and I'm in much the same situation. I call 5 nights a week. We have classes for Mainstream, Plus, and A1. We have 2 mainstream clubs, one of which is a true mainstream club. The other one is really a mainstream class, but it is a club, and it has started beginner every year for 37 years. They always start right from the bottom every year, and we have people in that club that have danced for 20-some-odd years with us. Don't ask me why they stay, they do. And we have an A1 group, so our program consists of a slide that we can put everybody into. We mentally tossed a coin, and Chuck won, so he gets the first 20 minutes.
Thank you, Martin. Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the meal. Ran a little late, but I think everybody made it here. Martin asked me to tell you a little bit of how I got involved. I started dancing in high school, started calling in 1965, and in 1978 I was a school teacher and got burned out and decided the only thing else I was doing at the time was square dance calling. So I made a full-time occupation out of it, and primarily I call in the Chicago area, or within an hour's drive of the Chicago area. I've done that for the last 17 years. I listed my program here, and I'd like to go through a little bit and tell you just about the clubs I call for and give you some unique backgrounds on some of these things that we do. I start my week off on Sunday nights with a class in Highland Park. Now, Highland Park is one of the richest areas in the country, so we deal with a very wealthy area, and it's kind of a unique situation. The club was forced a number of years ago with a problem of finding a place to dance, and the Park District said you can't have the hall on Sunday nights, we need a custodian. And the club members were able to convince the Park District to hire one of the club members as a custodian, and they were able to avoid the cost of having a custodian. This same particular club found out that the Park District was giving a grant to the Flower Club and the orchestra, so the club applied for a grant. They get a $1,000 grant every year from the Park District, and no need to pay for a custodian because they're their own custodian. We run a class on Sunday nights, which turns into a workshop, so the beginners, in effect, have a year-round program that they can learn the calls in our particular area. Most of our clubs, in fact, all our clubs except one in our area, are plus clubs. So not by choice, but by necessity, I have to teach my new students up through the plus level. And we're able to handle that fairly well with the year-round group lessons and then ending up with a workshop. And, of course, they go to many student dances. On Mondays, I start out with a line dance class at the Elk Grove Senior Center, which is, again, a year-round class at air-conditioned facility. And this is primarily women. Air-conditioned facilities, so we get to go year-round. I do try to incorporate some square dancing in all my line dance classes, because therefore I avoid the problem with the licensing as long as you do a little bit of square dancing with your line dance classes. After that, in the same building, I do a club called the Elk Grove Swingers. Again, this happens to be, most of my daytime clubs happen to be the CDP program, which involves, of course, rounds, squares, lines, contras, mixers, and folk dancing. A little bit of everything. This particular club, at the time and if you look at the list, there's 2 clubs that have a star in front of them. Those are the only 2 groups that I actually started. The rest of the groups I always inherited or was hired by. This particular club, when I learned the club or took up the club, was entirely women. It was all women, not a single man in the entire club. And they never seemed to have any trouble deciding which one would be the man, which one would be the lady, until about 6 months afterwards I decided why they were doing this, and it dawned on me, well, those playing the man's part always wore skirts, those doing the ladies' parts always wore skirts, and those doing the man's parts always wore slacks, and it didn't seem to be a problem with them. This group has since turned into more of a couples club as far as the mix of men and women. There's still a lot more women, but there's a lot of men coming too. On Monday evening, I do my own particular thing. I set up an advanced lesson, which turns into an advanced workshop, and later on a dance. This is, again, a year-round club. All the things on Mondays are year-round. On Tuesday, CNN stands for Central Nutrition Network, which is a private organization. It's a profit. It's not for non-for-profit, although it is government subsidized, that provides low-cost meals for senior citizens. And there's about 20 of these around the Chicago area, and in order to bring more people into their lunch program, they said, why don't you try doing a line dance class, which I do at this Plains Mall. In the afternoon, I work for a club called the Iron Park Senior Swingers, which again is primarily people, about half and half. Half the people are people that dance at regular clubs in the evening, and for one reason or another, or don't want to drive at night anymore, or just like to dance during the day. A lot of retired people. And the other half of the people tend to be people that only dance during the day and no place else. I followed up with the first and third evenings for a club called the Sunlighters, which does not dance in the summertime. And then on the second and fourth Tuesday evenings, I call for a club called the T&T. There are 2 clubs in Chicago area that are DBD. This is one of the clubs. They actually dance every Tuesday, and I alternate Tuesdays. On Wednesday mornings, I call for a group called the Plains Community Senior Center. Again, it's a CDP program. I put a little plus after it, because it is a little stronger on the a little stronger on the squares than a regular CDP program. After that, I call for a line dance class at the Norfolk Senior Center. On Thursday evening, I teach one of my second beginner's class called the Happy Twirlers, and this says class/club. Happy Twirlers are one of the few clubs that I know of that dance on 2 different nights. They dance on Friday nights in September through May, and on Thursday nights during the summertime. So in effect, our beginners on Thursday night can dance a year round with the club, get a solid years of lessons involved. On Friday mornings, I do a round dance class. This is something new. I recently went through a divorce, and my wife was the cure at the time, and I felt it was a way to expand my horizons, and I liked the round dance, so I began a round dance class. We ended up with the most successful round dance class in our area. We just graduated 27 couples last Friday morning. And again, we're getting about half the people are regular dancers in the evening program, and half the people only round dance, probably coming out because of the senior center. On the first, third, and fifth Fridays, I call for a group called the Happy Twirlers. Again, I mentioned about them before. That happens to be a plus club. On the second evening, I call for the Independent Dancers, a club I've called for since 1969. On Saturdays, the first Saturday of the month, I call for this club called the High Steppers. And the second evening of the Saturday, I call for the B&B Chicago. Okay, all my clubs during the day tend to be CDP programs with a little more emphasis on the Wednesday club with a little more on the squares. Of course, I think you're familiar with the CDP program. If you're not, I would suggest you get involved or go to the interest sessions. I am able, with the retired people, the people that come to during the day, to take people in almost at any time they want to come. If they come to me and say, we want to learn how to square dance, I always ask them to come on the Wednesday morning group. That would be the entry-level program. And if they have the time, I can move them up to different groups. Or if they've been out of dancing for a while, I have a place they can come to. So I have no problem about bringing people in on a weekly basis or a monthly. You don't have to wait until September for classes. That's not true in the evening, though. As in most areas with evening clubs, if you not line up in September for a class, you got to wait till next September. I look at my program and I make goals for the club. First of all, I've called for a long time for most of these clubs, and some people I have that danced to me for over 25 years that dance to me on a weekly basis. I must be doing something correct, and I thought about it. I try to set weekly goals, monthly goals, and yearly goals. And this time it's mostly about how I want them to dance or styling. I feel if I want them to learn a certain type of styling or a certain type of call, I have to do it, and I have to work at it. I look at the list after every dance, and I make a little list of what calls I haven't used. My ego does not get involved. I don't call a call because I don't like it. I call a call because I think the dancers need it. And I always put the dancers' needs first before my own. I never make any judgments about the value of any call. I've heard that too often from callers. I don't want to call such and such. I don't like to call it. I don't call it that way. I call it because the dancers need it. And I feel if I want them to do some of the calls that are called less frequently, I have to call them. And that's one way I think I keep people coming back, because I give them the variety of calls they wouldn't necessarily hear at other places. But you have to set up the goals to do that. The same thing on a monthly basis or on a yearly basis. Maybe for the last year I wanted them to work on, be able to do fan the tops more comfortably and with more success. So that was a yearly goal. I think the big problem, if you work for, in fact, all these groups except for the ones that are 2 stars are the 2-starred clubs are the ones that run myself. The rest of the clubs are run by either committee, president and officers, or in the case of the daytime clubs, I'm hired by a director of a senior center. And I feel the best way to avoid problems is to communicate. To talk and talk and talk, and all the time about what the club is doing, what I feel the club is doing, to answer their questions, to be available to answer their questions, to suggest things, to try to take some of the expertise that I've learned from other clubs and to bring it to each particular club and solve those problems. Oftentimes the dancers will get involved with an activity, and after a few years they feel they know more than the caller. And it's not always easy to dance or easy to communicate with everybody, but if you do try and make it a regular basis to talk to the officer of the club and the people in the club and let them know your opinions about how you think the activity should be run or your suggestions, trying always to be positive and not to be negative. But we are people with lots of experience, and we should give that experience to our dancers. The same thing with working in the daytime clubs. I'm dealing with mainly with directors of senior centers who don't know much about the activity, and it's even a greater need to talk to these people about what the activity involves, to sell them on the need or the opportunity for daytime programs for seniors, that people want to dance, that people want to come out and have a good time. The hardest place in most of the daytime clubs is finding space. They don't want to give enough space, or they haven't got the space to give. But you keep asking, you keep talking about it. And the thing I'm going to try this year, I've thought about this before, is a newsletter to actually express my personal opinions about the philosophy of dance, or how to recruit, or what level we should dance, and to publish a newsletter and have it out at the dances so that particular dancers can pick it up and take it home with them and talk to me about it. Recruitment. We try to make recruitment year-round. Whenever we get an opportunity to do demonstrations, which we do quite often, we are out in the malls, we're out in the schools, do a lot of school programs, do a lot of programs with youth and scouts. I try to always get names and addresses of people so we can recruit. If they're retired people, I can invite them to the next possible dance I can. So they don't have to wait until September. If they're in the evening program, then they have to wait a long time. And I try to get the club to think that the lifeblood of any club is to bring in new people. You have to always bring in new people every year, whether it's only a square. But once you miss 1 year of not having a class, we all know what happens. It becomes much more difficult. Now, as many areas, the Chicago area certainly is the same as other areas. We're losing clubs and we're losing dancers. And primarily the clubs that we're losing are clubs that are not bringing in students, not even anybody. I have 2 classes. I have a class on Sunday nights, one of the best classes I've ever had. We started with 11 couples, and we're going to graduate 11 couples. We did not lose a single dancer in this entire year, although one of the couples told us a couple weeks ago that she's pregnant. So hopefully we can find out some way of she should have danced all night, right? But hopefully we'll be able to pick up most of them. And of course, even if people do have to leave to have children, this has happened before, if they've had a good experience now, when the children are old enough, they'll come back to the activity. The particular group I have on Thursday nights was also, again, one of the largest classes we had. And it's kind of deceptive when I say the largest classes we had on Thursday nights, because it's a lot of single women. And what happened was one of the fellows in our daytime club took it upon himself to personally invite all the single women to come out to the class. And that's, in fact, what they did. The point we're having trouble now is finding a place for all these ladies to dance. Of course, the people that retired, the retired women can dance during the daytime clubs. But the other people might have a little bit of problem, because we only have 2 singles clubs in the area, and both of the singles clubs have a lot more women than men. But we do try to work on recruitment year-round. We keep a list of the names. We keep a list of the contact person that gave us the names. We keep a list of the person that gave us that name, if it was a club member, and try to get that particular club member to bring that student back into the fall class. And in fact, if we get a name in September and October, we just don't forget about them until next September. Periodically during the year, we'll talk to them and at least call them up and say, well, you're still interested in taking a square dance class. We'll see you in September. I am able, during the daytime clubs, to have an entry level at almost any point. That's the unique thing about my daytime programs. I don't have to have people wait. I do keep a card file of every person that ever dances to me more than once, and most of that is on computer. So I can, have a list of people, and I also keep, for a personal thing, I keep what occupation they have, because it certainly helps when I get a plumbing problem or a furnace problem. I know who to call up. And I must say that I had an experience this last winter where a guy saved me a couple $100 by being able to call up Charlie and say, Charlie, got trouble with my furnace. He was over there in a couple hours. We got it fixed. That's a personal thing I do. I think the real reason that most people stay in square dancing is the socialization. It isn't if the people are involved with the problem solving of calling and dancing, they tend to probably go into the higher levels. But the people that are coming on the regular club basis tend to stay because of the socialization, and I think that's very important. Any club that's very successful would do things other than square dancing. All our clubs do other things, such as picnics, or they go to the local plays, or they go out to a bowling league, or they go out and do golf. And we try to always encourage our new students and our regular club dancers to do these kind of things. And we're always suggesting to the club to do these kind of things. With the beginners class, we suggest that the angels go out with the beginners after the dance. The socialization is what keeps people involved. This is why I think people are willing to get involved with lessons and stay with all those lessons, almost a solid year of dancing before they're able to dance at the club, because they're having a good time in the social context and the friends they make. And if we can emphasize the socialization, I think it works. So I personally make it a point to send out birthday cards or to personally wish people birthdays. Happy birthdays, same with anniversaries. If they're ill, I will send them a card or call them up on the phone, or if they're in the hospital. Being a full-time caller, I do have some time during the day, and I make a lot of visits. And of course, with the same thing, with the age we deal with mainly, we go to a lot of funerals. I think that's all important. Also, I talked about the non-square dance activities. Try to encourage that. If I see a couple that's only square dancing and nothing else with the club, I try to get them involved with, the club's going out to the local play or going out to get pizza, and try to do that. Organizations. Personally, I do support the Dancers Organization, and I have to comment about this. At least a lot of callers in our area, I think, make a major mistake that they do not go out when they have a day off to dance. Now, lots of times when I have a day off, I don't want to go out dancing. But I go out dancing because I think the dancers want me out there. I do go to our state convention. I do go to our local festivals, and I think people like to see you out there dancing. I think a lot of callers make a mistake. And I have to mention that we've had some big dances in Chicago in this last year where I was like the only one or two callers among 1,000 dancers. We have a big dance in February called the Sweetheart Dance, close to 1,000 dancers. And other than the callers calling the dance, there was myself and one other caller. And there must be 50 callers in the area, and they don't go out. I think it's a major mistake that a lot of callers make. So I do support the Dancers Association. I go to their meetings when I can. I've been asked to go and make presentations. I've talked about CDP with the dancers, and also I'm involved with Contras. I've talked about Contras with the dancers. I do support my local callers organization. We used to have several in Illinois. We used to have Chicago callers, which has now been defunct and folded up. And it's a strange thing. I think CALLERLAB about 20 years ago thought that CALLERLAB would be a means of strengthening the local callers organization. At least in the Chicago area, I see the opposite. I see guys that only belong to CALLERLAB and do not support their local organization. I'm currently the vice president of the Lake County Callers. That's the county above Chicago, between Chicago and the Wisconsin line, and I'm the senior director of the Illinois Callers. So when time permits, I try to get involved with the local callers organization and the national callers organizations. I'm also involved with Lloyd Shaw Foundation, and I have done a lot of programs with Lloyd Shaw during the school year. I talk about the non-square dancing organizations. That's primarily during the day. All the senior centers that are allowing us to use space run other events, so I try to volunteer my time. When they had the inoculation for the flu, I helped out and those sort of things. Because if you want people to give you space, and that's always a problem. There's a number of groups that want, have asked me to do things during the day especially. I just can't find the space, and it's very difficult to convince the people that run the senior centers or the park districts to allow you to have space. This is one way to get involved and plus communicate with them. Personal philosophy. I always try to put the dancers and the club before myself. I try to keep very greatly to work on keeping my ego in check. I take it very seriously that we have a strong obligation that we do affect people's lives. It's a fun activity. But I can tell you any number of stories where people have come to me and said, before we took this class, we were ready to get divorced. We're not saying it's all square dancing, but it certainly helped, and now we're staying together. Or I recall a lady who came to my Tuesday afternoon seniors club who just lost her husband. And the first time she came, she simply sat in her car. And the second time she came, she walked up and down the parking lot for half an hour and then went home. And both times went out and talked to her and said, whenever you're ready, come in here. You had a good time with your husband dancing. And if he was alive, you'd be dancing now. Whenever you're ready, come into this club. And finally she did come into this club and eventually met somebody in the club who had lost his wife and they got married. So I take it very seriously that you do affect people and what we do and how we call. So you have to be very careful. And it's not just fun, but it has to be seriously obligation. Okay, there'll be time for questions later on, so thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Gives you a lot of food for thought. Square dancing is something more than just a dance.
Very nice, Chuck. Some of what I'm going to say is probably going to be repeating what Chuck just said. I might say I've been calling for 30 years. I got started square dancing. I don't know how many of you are acquainted with farming, but we were baling hay and got stuck. The guy that was driving the tractor was a square dancer, and he taught me into taking a lesson that night. So we left the baler sit and took a square dance lesson. And the third lesson, I was so enthused I did a singing call, and I've been hooked ever since. It's the greatest thing in the world. There's nothing better. Church first and then square dancing. That's the way it should be. That's my estimation. I call for 4 mainstream clubs, 1 plus club, and 1 advanced clubs. And in our area, most of the mainstream clubs are club run. They hire a caller. 3 of these clubs we started, but it still has a board, and they run the club. If we see them get into something we don't think will work, we try to encourage the other way, but still not say, you can't do this. It doesn't always turn out the best, but there have been splits here and there through years, but every club has that. But it's worked out very well for us. My wife's a loyal supporter. She works very hard for all the clubs and helps me immensely, and that's a big plus. A person that's single in the caller really has a lot more work on their shoulders. In our area, one of the biggest problems are halls right now. The schools in the Kansas City area went from $125 to $250 to $300 per night. In other words, telling us they don't want us around anymore. I wanted to go with the Federation and our Callers Association to the mayor and the other people in town and talk to them, but as yet we haven't done this. I think maybe a mass meeting with them would show them that we do have a lot of people that work for their community, and maybe we'll get someplace yet, but that's one of our problems. Anyhow, getting on to the clubs, okay. Like I said, everything is voted on. Some of the clubs are board run. In other words, they make the decisions every month and tell the club what we're doing. A couple of the other clubs, the club itself decides everything. We just try to give everybody in the club a job through the year, even if it's only a hospitality or something like that. Each club has 1 big dance every year. That's our money-making project, like a Hawaiian luau or something. And we make sure everybody has something to do and pass it around so that they all feel important. And my wife helps them a lot by obtaining things. She's the secretary to the superintendent of schools, and she buys a lot of the food through the school and stuff. We get it at reduced prices that way, and it helps us survive. Even though some of the clubs are small, it makes a big difference. And we try to watch if there's something we'd like for the club to do. Somehow or another, we work it around if we can to suggest it to some of them, drop a hint. But when it's presented, this guy that brings it up to the club thinks it's his idea. And it works very well. They'll come out there doing it if it's their idea or one of their own members, then always the caller is suggesting it. That may sound a little bit unimportant, but it's a big plus. Always get the dancers involved. Two of our clubs are rural clubs, and we have a little different situation there. We don't dance in the summertime much. We go every place else and dance, but our clubs don't. But we have fish fries and swim parties, things like that. So we keep the people together. And also in the summertime we do a lot of demonstrations at local fairs. We go to lots of rest homes. We do benefit dances for the homeless. The thing called Wings of Mercy Dance for Burn Center in Texas. And that gives us lots and lots of publicity. We try to get into church affairs when we can. Anything like that, any organization where we can go in and show them our activity. I heard one thing today that we're going to try. One caller was doing an exhibition dance at a fair, had 4 squares on the floor with their fancy clothes on, and he called for them for a while, and then he said, well, let's just get people out of the bleachers to come out and dance with us. But he had 4 squares of dancers hid in the bleachers in street clothes, and they all jumped up and jumped out there and brought a lot of people with them, and nobody knew that they were dancers, and it worked very well. I'm sure it's something I'm going to try. I just thought I'd throw that in. That's not exactly managing a home program, but it may be something to help us get numbers. Also at our club dances, we try to have, at least outside of our one big dance of a year, we try to have other special dances like donkey dances, canary dances, choo-choo, kangaroo dances. Not all the time, but always so it's something different. I have it written down here a little further on, but I'm going to say it now. It's a lot more difficult to call for your home clubs than it is when you travel. When I go out on tour, I can use the same program and the same new figure every night for a while because it's all new people. At home, it's much more difficult, not only because it's just same clubs, but you have people in your club that dance mainstream with you, but also belong to your plus club and dance A1, A2, some of them C1, but they support our lower levels. So we have a big challenge to try to entertain them. I try to prepare my dancers so that they can go dance with anyone. They don't, not all that's managed, but I work very hard to upgrade my dancers so that they can go out and not get slaughtered. I detest to go out and dance to another caller when I know what he's going to call 2 tips before he calls it. Then his dancers come to my dance and they go home and say he doesn't call off the list. But it's not that. I stay on the list, but I think we really need to work at the level we're calling to make it interesting. Personal opinion, that's probably what evolved the other levels of dancing in the beginning, because we didn't work hard enough to make it entertaining at the level we were calling at. So I try very hard to do that. Lots of times dancers will say, well, we never know what you're going to call. And we like that because we don't want to do it before you say it. I just tell them the reason I do that because I can't remember what I called a while ago, so I have to think of something different. But I like for my dancers to be able to go any place and dance. Also in the rural area where it works good for us is our club people are very, very good about coming out and supporting lessons. When we have lessons, it's almost a party. Our Sunday night lessons, I love them. It's just nothing better. It's noisy, hooping and hollering, and the dancers are mixed in with the class all night long. And we invite our class members to come out to our dance after 6 weeks. That may raise some eyebrows, but that's what we do. I make sure that they get to dance 1 or 2 tips that night, and I call what they can dance. That also helps to shorten our lessons program, because they're getting reviews on this stuff at the dance too, plus they're dancing with experienced people. And it works very well for us. Another thing that helps us in the rural areas is a couple of the places where I call. We have a hall where we dance. We have a big gymnasium beside it that parents bring their kids. Don't have to have a babysitter or anything. When it comes time to eat, everybody eats, kids and all. Sometimes Margie has to go in there and get them to calm them down, but it sure is a plus. The parents don't have to worry about getting a babysitter. Also, I try to put a little bit of a challenge into each dance. Not every tip, but try to put a challenge into it. Also, I work all the quarterlies, and I do some mixers. I do workshops of new calls. At our particular Callers Association, I've been here in the last couple of years, we don't do workshops. People don't like workshops. Well, to me, that's the only way to go, because how did you get chained down the line on the list? It's because somebody was workshopping it and CALLERLAB decided it was a good enough call to keep. I'm a firm believer in that. Also, mixers. I love to do mixers. I get pretty downtrodden on it once in a while when somebody comes up afterwards, this one person out of 2,000, and tells you what he thinks of you and your mixers. But I guess you just have to carry the monkey on your back and ignore it. That's all I know to say about it. A lot of areas you go into and call, it can be just as quiet as a mouse yet after the second tip. People dance and they go sit on the sideline. The third tip, you have a mixer, and I use a lot of mini squares. From that tip on, or as soon as it's over, the floor is noisy. If you don't believe it, try it sometime. If you have a very quiet group, have a mixer and make it lively. Maybe teach your workshop material in that mini square if possible. After that tip is over, listen to the people. Somebody may say they don't like mixers, but how come everybody... Well, it's just like going to the social hour over here at 6 o'clock. It's quiet. At 6:30, everybody's yakking. You can't hear yourself. That's just the way it is after you have your mixer. Never fails. Let's see. One other thing I wanted to touch on. Oh, this is one of my pet peeves. This may not just be for a home program, but that's where it starts. I try to be a stickler on encouraging people to wear square dance clothes. In the Kansas City area, the 30 years I've been calling, every club that folded, a couple, 3 years before they folded, most of the people started wearing street clothes. There's nothing wrong with the street clothes. The only thing is that's a signal that those people have lost interest. And you walk up to them and say, have you had a class? No, we couldn't get anyone. They couldn't get anyone because they've lost interest, and they're not trying to get anyone. The clubs that are all fancied up always have a class. It's because those people still have the enthusiasm and are wanting to dance. My biggest regret today is to go out and call someplace or go visit another caller, and the dance is 8 to 10:30 now because people can't dance till 11 anymore. But instead of going home at 10:30 like they did when it was 11 o'clock, now they're going home at 10. When I started calling, you danced 8 to 11. The only thing is you didn't get to go home till 11:30 because they stomped and hollered and insisted for more. I would love to see that back into the activity again. I guess that's all I have right now.
Thank you very much. I guess it becomes my turn. The one thing that I think we will bring up as a subject is the square dance clothes, after we've sort of covered what I'm going to talk about. I come from an area that's very well organized. We're in a city of about 200,000. Our province is organized fully. Matter of fact, our whole country is. We have a national federation of dancers and callers. It's one unit right across our country. In Saskatchewan, we're divided into 8 zones. I belong to a zone called Zone 3, which is centered around our city. And we have our own, what we call zone. We have our federation for our province. Every zone is represented. Our callers belong to the association. They're operative within it. They have a single vote. Each club has a club rep, and they're represented to that club. Anybody can attend the meetings, and anybody can vote. However, if a contentious issue comes up, then there's a call for a secret ballot vote, and only the representatives can do it. And I belong to that. As a matter of fact, I was one of the ones that drew up the charter for our area, and it's been a model charter for our province. That may sound like I'm bragging, but it is so it worked. There were 8 of us involved that did it, and to my knowledge, there has never been a request for a ballot vote. So it means cooperation. And I think that's the big thing, is the cooperation of the callers and the dancers in any given area for any program to succeed. That's the first item I would like to just say. I call for 2 mainstream classes, one of which is a class that I run. The other is a singles club, and I mentioned that at the beginning. Its main purpose is a social function. We have married off 120 couples in 37 years. So I think it's been a success. Its lowest count of squares has been 5, its highest has been 13. Presently it's 7. We have a plus class. I might also add that the classes that we teach are open to any dancers, any members who want to come. We call them members, but that's not quite the way. If a caller is not sponsoring a beginner class, it's safe for him or his dancers to bring a dancer to the class I teach, because we encourage their angels to come and dance with us, and we expect that dancer to go back and guest at their clubs when asked to. We expect that dancer to return to the clubs that brought them. Try it sometime. It works. Believe it or not. Our plus class is open to any dancer who has graduated and has danced a year at the mainstream level. And it's open again to any dancer in the area. I run it. Our A1 class is exactly the same way. It's open to any dancer who has danced plus and is competent at it. Our mainstream club is 26 years old. It has 12 squares. I was going to give you numbers of people, but 12 squares is easier to handle. And it supplies a place for our class graduates to come to. We maintain it as a mainstream club, with the odd introduction of the very simple plus once in a while for workshop purposes. Our plus club is 40 years old, and it grew from a mainstream about 15 years ago. It's about 10 squares now. Our A1 club is 40 years old, and it grew from a workshop club when A1 became a viable program. It's 6 squares, and it's executive run. I might say that the mainstream club is executive run, the plus club is executive run, the A1 club is executive run, but these are clubs I started. We do not have a charter or anything of that nature. I am a member of the executive, have been since they started. Our area has 13 clubs, most of which are over 25 years of age. We have dancers in our area that have danced in these clubs for 20, 30, 40 years. So it's not just my success. It's the success of our area. We started the association in 1956 as a Callers Association and quickly realized the Callers Associations, if you'll pardon me saying this, don't work. There's too many big egos involved. And we got control of the egos by inviting the dancers to come and represent their clubs. And it worked for us. I won't say it'll work for everyone, but for us it has worked extremely well. When I say us, I'm talking about our province. We have the round dancers belong to it, the callers belong to it, and anybody that's teaching, and it's just been great. However, calling is also a business. You may not think so if you're just calling once a week. But in my job for 44 years, I like to say I was a caller, a working man for 44 years, and I worked so I could support my calling habit. Now I'm retired. I've been retired about 4 years, and I have a pension that supports my habit. I don't think you can honestly say that you're going to make a great living as a caller. Not in our area anyways. It's a nice hobby. It pays for itself. Being a business, we have only one thing we can sell, and that's ourselves and our dancing program. So you have to make it something that people are going to want. And of course, the people that we're dealing with are our customers. How do you please your customers? You're the distributor. You should know your product. You should know what you're selling. Never go out half prepared. Keep abreast of what's available music-wise, program-wise. And most of all, to us, you must know your dancers on a personal level. The first night they come in there, don't just take their money and sign them up and give them a receipt and say, sit over there till I put the music on. My wife and I work as a team. She's my PR. She knows how many kids they've got, how old they are, where they went to school before the night's over. She knows them by first name. She knows how long they've been married and all the trimmings. I'm fortunate that I have a wife like that. I have a partner that is my hostess all the way through. I got into trouble using that a couple of years ago in CALLERLAB, but anyways, we look at our association more like a chamber of commerce. It's the thing that we use, and you should be a working part of it. I don't think that any caller. We have one caller that's trying to work without it. He has not yet got a club, and he's been a caller for 14 years. Maybe we're cutting him out. I don't know, but I do know that if he was working with us, everybody would be working to help him. As it is, he's relying on himself and not getting anywhere very fast. We encourage dancers to belong to our association because they will know what's going on in the area. Happy customers are essential. Dancers should be taught to mix right from the beginning. They should be encouraged not to come to a dance and dance with just their partner. After all, the friends that they meet on the square dance floor may become the friends for the rest of their life. Our beginner class last year, 4 couples met on the floor. In the spring, just when we graduated, 4 of them went on a cruise. They didn't know each other. Since they've come back, they're still talking to each other. They had a wonderful time. They're firm friends, and I would like to think that they'll probably be firm friends for the rest of their life. So friendships within the Square Dance Club are something that I think we as callers should promote. And if you can't do that, look at what you're doing. There must be some way that you encourage people to mix and be friends. You're using mixers, which I think is a great idea. We have them swing their corners and go off to a new square. We do crazy little things like that. All the best-looking girls go to the other square. That type of thing. And we maybe act a little silly sometimes in our classes. We get them to laugh at us rather than fret at each other if a mistake goes. It's quite nice for the caller to be part of that class. We are fortunate. Our hall is in our home for our classes. We have a hall that will dance 6 squares comfortably, 7 squares squashed. So when they come to our home, there's a bonding effect that takes place. They immediately become to know us because they're in our home surroundings. And if you let the dancer know you as a person rather than as a professional caller, you have a much better chance of success and keeping them in the program. How do you obtain dancers? This sort of, to me, is like which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Because we have been successful, we have a large core of dancers that we can work with. They are our main recruiting source, and they know it. Twice a year we write them a letter and tell them how square dance going is in the area, not just in our clubs, but right around the whole area. Give them an outline where the new dances are coming up, where they're at. We also give an outline of what the spring is going to bring in the form of special dances, what we would like to see happen in the fall. And we remind them every year that if your club is going to survive, it's up to you to get dancers. We have used other methods. One method that worked very well for us, we got 17 squares with this little gadget. We went to the local Safeway store and offered to print their bags for a week. And we put the Square Dance logo on and said, come to Square Dance. Of course, on the back of their bag was their Safeway logo, but ours was on the other side. And because most of the kids at the time we went in were in high school writing exams, they were short of stuffers. So our Square Dance people went in and stuffed the bags. And we put in a little application form in the bag as they were being filled up. It worked beautifully. We had one problem when it ended. And this was not in Saskatoon. This was a club I called for out of town. We got the 17 squares, and the executive of the club, because this isn't a club I started, it was one I was taken in to call for. They were very independent, and they asked me to call in a very special manner. And I do not recommend it after having tried it. What we did, we had a tip for the beginners and a tip for the existing dancers, and we alternated all the way through the season. We started the dancers who knew how at the top end and the beginners at the bottom end. And we moved them to the center. About Christmas time, they met. We're dancing once a week. By the way, we only dance through the winter months, middle of September to the end of April. About Christmas time, they met, and then we went back up the ladder. At the end of the season, we had graduated the full 17 squares. They were still with us. But we had a phenomena occur, and I don't know why it was. Most of the people that came to us were hobby people. Now, I don't know whether you've run into this. Because we did a survey of the people that left, and they said, well, what are you doing? Are you coming back to the club? And they said, one said to me, no, he said, I'm learning to fly next year. Another said, no, we're taking up bowling. And this is the way it went. We did not make square dancers out of them all. And I think the reason was that they never felt that they were part of anything because of the two different sections meeting and growing together. So it's something you have to look at. Sometimes things don't work.
This one's the front side of your cassette.
The first night he goes out to recruit, and I'm using the word he generically. I'm including the ladies. I could say they go out to call, but being a man, I'm stuck that way. And I apologize. You may have to do this many times before you actually make a success of it, and you're going to have to invest money to make a success of it. It's the same thing as a small business. It may not work the first time. It may not work the second time. But it's up to you to make it go. Nobody else but you can really make that go. What you're selling is yourself that very first night. The program has nothing to do with it. If you go out and call Circle Left and make them enjoy it, you've sold yourself, not the Circle Left. If you go out and do an Alaman Left and a promenade and they laugh and they enjoy it, you've sold yourself. Those people like you, and they will come back to you. Nobody can do it for you, not even CALLERLAB. Although a lot of people blame the loss of dancers on CALLERLAB, I don't think it's true. I think we try to rush our dancers too much. We have had most success with church groups, where they have a young people's group or that type of thing, or they have a married couples group. We go out and do a one-night stand with them. And it's very successful for us. We've had a couple of oddities happen. We haven't had all these clubs all these years. We've had other clubs, too, besides. Matter of fact, we've lost 5 clubs over the years. I'll be quite honest with you. But 2 of them were very unique. And if anybody can explain this to me, I'd like to hear it. 2 of them danced for 10 years to the day. They both had 10 to 12 squares. They both had money in the bank. And on the anniversary of their 10th year, they quit dancing. They all joined other clubs, but they quit dancing in their church. The only thing I can see, one of them did say to me, we are no longer young people. So their young people's group dissolved and they went elsewhere. I like, you mentioned something about recruiting. What was it you said? Yeah, I thought it was great. Your hidden dancer. I've never heard that one before. I'm going to use that when I go home. I think that's terrific. We keep all our dancers, the whole record of our dancers, on computers. We write personal letters to them. How many here have computers? How many know how to personalize a computer record? It's a wonderful gimmick. If you've got one, learn to do it. Because the dancers come out and say, gee, it was great of you to take the time to write that personal letter to me. And they love it. You're important in their life. Don't ever tell them how you do it. I've talked about that. We are a fee area. In other words, our clubs all run on a yearly fee. They come in the door, they pay for their dancing up front. The fees for the dancing on a weekly club will run about $100 for the season. On a bi-weekly, which some of our clubs dance, will run from $50 to $80, depending on what the hall rentals and so forth. All our clubs in our area and right across our province, if you belong to a club, you can guest in any club without an invitation. The onus is on you as a dancer to be sure that you can dance what that club is being called for. So if you go out as a plus dancer and get clobbered in an A1, the only one to blame is yourself. And our dancers know that, and they're very conscious of what they know. One of the other things we do that promotes the friendship between our clubs, and all the clubs in the city do that, and a lot of them around the province. If a guest, like we will have maybe a square or 2 squares of guesting each night in any club in the city, and the clubs will make a draw for a free pass from the members that attend. And this promotes the guesting between clubs. It promotes the friendliness between clubs. I was away for 2 months this year because we were given the opportunity to be in Australia for 2 months. I had no qualms about telling the callers in the area that I would be away, asked them to call for my beginner class, my A1 class, my plus class, and the clubs that I have. My beginner class, I have never trained them as well myself. The fellow that did it did a great job. I was very pleased with what he did, and he was very pleased to have done it. But those dancers are still coming back to dance in the class. They didn't go anywhere else. They came back. So by having an implicit trust in each other, we're generating that between our clubs. Our clubs will guest embody between each other. If, say, you wanted to go away, your club would come over and guest with mine. I go away, our club would go over and guest with him. And neither of us would worry about who was going to have whose dancers. I think that's a misnomer. Dancers are going to dance where they want to dance and where they're happy. If you're doing the right thing, the toes are pointing the right way. If you're doing the wrong way, the toes are pointing out the door. So keep that in mind. You can make your dancers happy. They will dance anywhere, and they will always come back to you to enjoy what you're giving them. Supply and demand. Know what your area needs. Again, we're talking in business. My job was managing people for quite a number of years. So you have to be able to supply what the people are demanding. If you see your dancers starting to at the dance, maybe going home early, you better look at what you're calling. You better look at the interest, the music, the whole bit. How many of you keep records? And I'm not calling the things that go around on your turntable. I'm talking about records not just for income tax, but what you have called and when you have called it, and maybe why you have called it and what success you had with it. How many of you do it? A lot of you aren't doing your job. How do you know what you called last week at that club? Are you relying on your memory? Because if you are, I want to remind you it's one of the first things to go. And don't ask what the second is, because I don't remember. But seriously, keeping records is very important. I keep day-to-day records of what I call at each club, tip-to-tip records. I keep track of the themes I use each night. If we're having a Christmas party, of course, that's easy. I use Christmas records. How many of any Easter records? There's a couple. They're hard to find. I've got about 3, I think, in my box. They only come out at that time of the year. But theming a dance is sometimes very important. Some nights we have all singing calls. I'm fortunate because I took a lot of voice training in my early years, and I have a lot of fun with music at times. And the dancers will enjoy that once in a while. A little bit goes a long ways. To keep that in mind, too. So does the odd gimmick. A little bit goes a long way, an odd surprise. I don't think you have to be out in left field with your choreography to keep the people happy. Don't be afraid to have fun with your dancers. And I don't mean nasty fun from the microphone. I mean, if somebody goofs up, have a little laugh with them and maybe say, well, Joe, it's not your fault. Maybe I did it, but take care. Joe, just smile with them, laugh with them, let them know that you're a human being. And if you make a mistake, don't be afraid to own up to it. When I learned to sight call, I was a 10-year experienced caller, I thought. And I heard about sight calling. I went back to the club and said, well, gang, I'm going to learn to sight call. For 2.5 years, they suffered while I learned. And they got very good at sight calling before I did. They were going around like this. And we had more fun in those 2 years than I've ever had. So they were part of my learning process. Don't be afraid to learn with them. What do we keep in records? Membership, attendance, music we've used, what we called, what we taught, what was the theme, and the following-ons are really for income tax purpose, income earned, expenses paid out, and a correspondence file. We do the odd out-of-town dance, but our main effort in square dancing is our home programs. And you have to work very, very hard to have a successful home program. If it's just going to be treated as a hobby that you do when you like it, the way you like it, and you call what you want, it ain't going to work. You have to have a plan. I've already done my true confession, so I don't have to tell you I've got it down here, true confession time. We've lost 5 clubs over the years. To be successful as a local club caller, I'll just use the wind-up here, your area must also be a success. You may be the only club in the area, so it's up to you to have your area be a success. But if you're coming from an area like we are, your whole area has to be a success. When I started calling, we had 26 clubs, most of them in the area of 18 to 20 squares. About 1960, the bubble broke. TV came in, the bars opened up, and things like that. We dropped down to our present level, would you believe, of 13 clubs and 2 round dance clubs. We still have those 13 clubs and those 2 round dance clubs, and they're still very viable, but they're not 20 square clubs. They run in the range of 5 to 15 squares, but they have been at that for the last 30 years. We are supplying dancers. They go in, they dance with us. The average life of our dancers depends on the age that they start. If they start in their 50s, they will probably dance till about 65, and then they start going south. If they start in their 60s, we get a 5-year period out of them, and then they start going south. And we supply a tremendous amount of dancers to the snowbirds down in Mesa. So, well, probably a lot of you do, too. The last thing I would like to say, to keep square dancing alive, you must work at it, because nothing survives without working at it. We're open for questions and maybe the odd comment from here.
Just a couple things from listening to Martin and Gene. He talked about writing down your program, keeping records. I would suggest you do one more thing, and I'll tell you an incident what happened. I would suggest you also put down what you wear. Because there's some clubs you call for, like, for example, once a year. There's a club in Milwaukee I call for once a year. And I didn't used to keep track of what I wore. I got there early one night, and the round dancer was doing his program, and I had a little scrapbook there, and I was thumbing back through the pages. So I thumbed back 1 year, and I was wearing the same shirt that I was wearing that night. I thumbed back 2 years. I was wearing the same outfit the 3 years in a row, and I said, I think starting now I better write down what I wear. I think so they know I own more than one outfit.
I have a comment on that. You're lucky you can still wear the same outfit that you wore last year.
And the other thing about square dance clothes in general, our daytime clubs are very, we don't wear square dance clothes. It's an option. They can wear square dance clothes. I tell them up front, the first time they ever come, all they own is square dance clothes, including square dance pajamas. I don't own anything else in my wardrobe. But the square dance clothes are optional. Our Tuesday afternoon club, which is our largest daytime club, we'd average 8 squares in the wintertime and about 13 or 14 in the summertime. That club has voted to dance once a month, the first Tuesday of the month, is square dance clothes. The rest of the time is not. Our beginners classes, we do not insist on square dance clothes. They do have to wear square dance clothes to the club dances. I do believe personally that it is a detriment. We're in the activity. We're sold on the activity for many years, and we look at the clothing requirement in a different way than the non-dancer. I do believe that some non-dancers are turned off by the clothes we wear, and I hear that primarily from the recent graduates, the women. And I think that we're starting to see, at least in our area, a little lessening of the restrictions on the square dance clothes. We're starting to see some alternative styles, prairie skirts, or a nice square dance type outfit without the petticoat. That seems to be the petticoat they object to. So I think perhaps this is the way to go. That's a personal opinion. Something else I was going to say. Oh, sometimes, as Martin says, sometimes you do everything right and the club still folds up. I used to call for a very unique club called the Teacup Chains, composed of all Japanese Americans. We used to dance at a Buddhist temple. Most of these people were Christians. We had a Jewish square dance caller, Jewish round dance leader, and myself a Polish Catholic caller. It was United Nations. We used to dance in one of the worst areas in Chicago. If you know Chicago, it's the uptown area. We used to dance on a Sunday afternoon, and the hall was packed every Sunday afternoon. Every first and third Sunday afternoon, we had a packed house. They used to run a Sakura festival in the spring. And this was the big dance. This was a ticket dance that sold out within a week. They used to have 41, 42 squares up on display into the Park District. And this went on for years and years and years. And it got to the point about 4 or 5 years ago that they just simply stopped dancing. Mainly because they've gotten older and just retired. They retired, and some of them have moved up back to California or Florida and are dancing down there, and some dancing by daytime clubs. But sometimes you can do everything right, and the club is still going to fold up, and you really shouldn't feel bad about it.
I'd like to introduce my wife. She just came in. She's been out at the partner session. That's Terry over there. I did neglect to say one thing about clothing. We have taken on a little project in our area. We sort of inherited it from a store that decided to quit square dancing. It's called a New to You. And I'm quite sure that, girls, you've had the problem with hanging your clothes in the clothes closet in the dark, and they shrink. You've got to learn to leave them in the light, and they don't shrink. But seriously, the New to You has worked extremely well, but for us, and I'll tell you, it's right off the side of our hall. So the new dancers come in, and of course, women are curious, so are men. We have men's clothing as well, because it tends to shrink on men's too. And the stuff is there if they want it, and the price is reasonable. I mean, they can get dresses for $10, $15, so they're not breaking their neck. And it works out extremely well. The people come in, they say, well, this is what we'd like for the dress, and we argue with them and say, well, we can sell it at that maybe, but if it doesn't sell, we may have to mark it down. They get their money out of it. We don't worry about making money out of it ourselves. And the point is that we have a source of clothing for them, clothing that they can try on right there, and if they don't like it, that's fine. We do encourage square dance dress. And we've had many women say, I am not going to wear that crinoline. But those same people, after dancing once or twice in them, are looking for the biggest dang crinoline we've got. So it does work if you have it available to them. So it's a place also for your dancers who are currently dancing to get rid of some of their clothes that are hanging in the closets collecting dust. It also gives them a reason to come out and dance with your beginners if you can work it in conjunction with it. We're open for questions unless you have a comment or two to make. Okay, the floor is open now. I don't want people just standing up and starting to talk. There's a microphone down there. Please arrange yourself in order and dash up there and get up in line behind one another, and let's get at it. Tell us who you are.
Paul Tufel from West Virginia. What kind of prices do you charge the people?
Well, I had mentioned that for the classes, we would charge $100 for the season. And that gives them 33 dances. It gives them lunch, and it gives them lemonade. That's something else. All our clubs serve lemonade halfway through. All the clubs in our area serve lunch at the end of the dance to increase the socialization of the dancers. Yes, ma'am.
Jerry Hardy, Stone Ridge, New York. On the bag logos that you mentioned in the supermarkets, how much did that run your club?
I think at that time, this was done quite a few years back, it cost us about $75 to do 3,000 or 4,000 bags.
Generally in our area, the daytime clubs charge a little less. It's about $4 a couple. The evening club is about $6 a couple. We do have a couple clubs that figure in advance as of September 1 what the total cost of running the club is. That's hall rental, callers, and cuers. They divide the entire cost up among the club members, and the club members put in that amount of money. So when the first dance occurs in September, the club has already paid for everything. And when the club has made any guests coming in during the season, that's all put back into the treasury for the next year, so they can deduct that, and then they never have to worry about that. So they pay up front a lot, but then at the end of the season, whatever left over goes back into the treasury or into a party.
Basically, that's how we work.
Bob Roth out of Encinitas, California, right near San Diego. This is my first CALLERLAB convention, and I've got a wealth of information already. I was going to ask for a suggestion or a recommendation from you gentlemen. In January, I started calling for a club that for the last 2 years has not had a class, and this year they're debating whether they'll have a class again, and they're seeing in their election or their attempt at having an election not getting officers or people who want to volunteer to be officers to keep a club running. We recently had a club fold for that reason in the San Diego area. Any recommendations on what a caller for a club can do to help the class or help the club get a class going and understand that if they don't get new blood, they're probably going to go the way of that other club and fold? Just recommendations.
I think you have just solved your own problem. You've got to tell them. You have. How much, I'm going to be quite up front, are you willing to sponsor a club yourself, a class yourself?
Yeah, probably.
Are you willing to sponsor it and stand out and say, this is not for you, this is for all the clubs in the area?
In our area, that'd probably be difficult.
You think that would be deadly in your area? You're afraid to be an apostle.
Just the number of clubs in a close proximity.
Yeah, I see. You really have to take the bull by the horn. That's the only way I can describe it, is take the bull by the horn. Of course, we started it in the beginning that way ourselves, and it's easy to say, do it this way. But you're going to stick your neck out and you do it, I'll tell you.
I would suggest that you have to convince them of the need that if they don't get new people, the club's going to fold up. But as a caller, you can suggest ways of recruitment, ideas. You can, suggest demonstrations. Anything that you can come up with to communicate, not just to the officers, but the club itself.
Okay, I'm Chuck Veldhuizen from Sioux City, and I've started about 8 clubs. And one of the problems I've run into is I'll spend all my time and money in getting a club started, and then I give it away to the officers. And then sometimes they make some really stupid mistakes. Is it better to have a caller-run club, or how would you handle something like that? I mean, by making stupid mistakes, I mean, like, we had one club that got so big, they says, well, we're not going to let singles come anymore, or we're not going to let kids come anymore, and it just kind of split the club.
Well, I don't know if you can get away with it or not, but I had a good friend passed away this last 3 or 4 months ago that started a club just like you. Then it became board run, and he made the statement at callers meeting, I'm part of the board. He said, I just sit back, they run the club as long as they do what I want them to. And if it's something I don't want them to do, I tell them they can't. I don't know if you can get away with that or not, but
yeah, I can't be at all the meetings that they have, though. That's the problem, too. They just...
Yeah, that's... When you call from multiple clubs, that's the problem. We only get to support about 3 of our clubs as far as the meeting, but you just have to try to be forceful as much as possible if you see a mistake coming.
Let me tell you something that happened in our area, and I'll give you a description of the stance. Our singles group decided that they were going to go and rent a hall, this is during the summer, and make a bid on an existing callers dance facility. Now, I know the caller well, we're personally good friends, and I didn't know a thing about this. This was done during a summer meeting that we didn't attend. I found out about it. I wrote a letter to every club member, called a meeting. The executive was there, and they didn't know what. I didn't say why the meeting was being called or anything else. And I put it on the line. I said, I have called for you people. At this time, it was 30 years. I do not like what you have done. Either you straighten it out or find yourself a new caller. Now, the nice thing about it was that all the callers in our area were behind me on that move because we cooperate. And they had a choice, basically, of doing without a caller or straighten up. And there was no problem. They straightened up real quick. And that's the cooperation that the callers and the dancers can have. By being straight up, straightforward. Don't pick on one person. Don't go to the president and say, why did you do that? Or the secretary, why did you do that? Bring it to the whole club and say, this is what's happened, this is my stance. I'm a very ethical person. I don't believe that this stance is proper for this club to do. You're going to hurt the dancing in the area. Give them the whole reason. 9 times out of 10, they will come around beautifully. People basically are fair. At least I like to think so. Sir.
My name is Jerry Geishorn, and I'm from Lewisberry, Pennsylvania, just outside Harrisburg. And I would like to say one thing. I'm probably too young of a caller to be telling you guys this, but I want to congratulate you guys for keeping the mainstream going, okay? Because I think mainstream is a basis for the whole calling. I mean, let's face it, every level that's above mainstream is taught or broken down into mainstream, okay? If you don't have the basics, you don't have anything else. And there's so many areas like our area where there's only maybe 1 club or 2 clubs that have some mainstream in them. Everyone else is plus, and I've seen squares in some of these clubs over the years. They have big classes, They'll have classes 4, 6, 8 squares each year and can't retain one square in any one year. And my theory on that's always been, if I had those kind of classes, I'd just like to have a class like that just 1 year. If I could have a class like that 1 year, and I lost 50% or more each year, I would seriously look at my program and the way I was teaching. I think if I did that 2 or 3 years in a row, I don't know if I would keep teaching square dancing. That's just my thoughts on the teaching effects of square dancing. I think there should be. I never have large classes, but I think the retention rate should be there, and you have to have a rapport with your people, and try and bring them in. I just took over a club that went broke, and we're trying to get it going. And of course, with the help, there was no help at all. And I went out. I only spent 2 nights going out, because that's about all the time I had, going out and advertising and pushing and talking to people. But we got about 2 squares out for class, and they're all still there yet. So I know it takes a lot of work, but I think mainstream, these other levels are nice, and there's nothing wrong with A and C or anything else, because I'm up through A. But and I think that's great for the callers. I think each caller should probably dance at least 1 level higher than they're calling. It gives you some insight as to what's above there. But I want to congratulate you guys on this mainstream, because I think that's the key behind the whole square dance realm.
I'd like to point something out, though, that I don't think the average caller or the average dancer really realizes what CALLERLAB has. CALLERLAB recognizes destination programs. But each time you go as a destination, let's assume that you take basic as your destination program, which it can be. In other words, when you graduate your dancer, they can dance in a basic club. There are very few basic clubs around the country. So it doesn't take long to teach the basic destination program. If you teach mainstream as your destination program, you must have a place for those mainstream dancers to dance. Don't expect a mainstream trainee to come out and dance plus. It doesn't happen. And if you have to allow the proper time for those people to settle into their dancing. We recognize that plus is also a destination program. But poorly taught plus, poorly taught mainstream, and poorly taught basic is not a destination program. If you are going to teach those programs so that people can dance at the existing destination in your area, you have to take the time to do it properly. We have organizations that are saying you can teach through the plus, mainstream, and basic in 25 weeks and have competent dancers. I think there are dancers that you can do that to. And they will probably be university students who are in the learning mode, teenagers who are in the learning mode. The average 45 to 55, which we are really recruiting from, does not have the time to spend, nor the energy to spend, nor the willingness to spend the effort to learn it in 25 weeks. They will quit before it happens. You will get the elitists of that group to survive. So if you start with 10, 15 squares in a beginner class, expect to graduate them in 25 lessons at the plus level, you might get 2 squares out of it. And I'm speaking from experiences that I've seen and monitored around the countryside. I have never tried it myself. I wouldn't try it because I think it would be an insult to the people I'm trying to teach.
Another thing we do on the levels, when I teach plus or advanced either one, towards the end of the class period when these people are about to join our club or somebody else's or whatever, we really work on it and encourage them, not say you must, but encourage them to keep on at least 1 level below what they're dancing. If it's A, at least keep on with plus. hopefully all the levels. But we really work on it to encourage them to keep on. And like I said earlier, when they do come to our mainstream dance, we beat our brains out to try to make sure that they're entertained, just like the guy that just graduated.
This will be our last question.
Okay. I'm from Doug Sewell from Youngstown, Ohio. Our area is predominantly plus. I don't know of any other than special and senior programs that have mainstream. I would say that probably the three places where we seem to lose dancers are about the fifth week when the novelty wears off, just about the time the hard calls like spin chain through and teacup chain come through, we start to lose dancers there. And at graduation, if you have a significant gender imbalance or problems pairing up people in singles clubs. And this is just my observation. I'm a dancer that calls at this point.
Okay, very interesting. Your observation is actually very true. There are points where you do lose the dancers, where their interest drops off, where their abilities drop off. You'll quite often see that. Have you any comments to add at the end, Chuck?
Just to add to what he mentioned, this is why I think the socialization is so important. If the people form friendships, as Martin said, if they form friendships early on, they'll tend to stick. It's the people that don't form the friendships for whatever reason or don't get involved socially with things other than square dancing with the activity. But if they have friends that are going and they feel part of a club, they'll hang with it until they feel proficient.
And there's a difference between friendships and cliques. Our clubs are all one big clique. We're fortunate we don't have people disappearing to go out for lunch. That's one of the reasons we have lunch. So these 5 or 6 couples don't decide, well, we're going out to the local pizza place, and they leave half an hour early so they get the best seat. They know that they're going to get a reasonable lunch. And we have lunch committees that provide these. And sometimes you women do a fine job of providing lunches. The best cooks in the world are square dance women, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm a living, shall we say, image to that.
Only comment I have is I want to thank you for coming in and listening to us. And my part of the program, if you picked up one thing that you think might help, then I feel like I was successful today.
Thanks for staying. I'm very pleased, but just before we go, I'd like just a rough head count. What we got? We must have about 65 in here right now. Yeah, there's a couple hiding behind the pool. Thank you again. If you've learned anything, please let us know. Oh, by the way, if you feel like Chuck is deserving of running for the board, we do have one of the applications up here, and if any of you are full members of CALLERLAB, want to support him, I've signed for him. I think he would be a very good person to have on the board.
We'll do what we can to get there. Appreciate that.